So it's time for us to begin to move on. Um, and as Lindsay mentioned, I learned this prayer from Mary Mazowski, my teacher, and that's one of the reasons it's always such a privilege to share it, that and the welcoming prayer. And also because it's been a powerful prayer in my life. I really can say that before the forgiveness prayer, I did not know what forgiveness was. I never experienced it. And so um, powerful. And thank you, Lindsay, for your opening remarks too. I think what we need to do in this time in our, not only in our country, but in our world, to learn to get along with one another and to learn to see the best in each other. So, and to learn to forgive, to forgive. So let me just show you ever so briefly the schedule. It's simple. And if I can share it, I've been doing mostly audio Zoom calls, so forgive me if you, I think you can see the schedule now though. So we had the introduction, we had the centering prayer and break. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is forgiveness and what it's not, just to conceptualize our whole time together, because of some of the misconceptions that we have about what forgiveness is, and they're not good or they're not bad. They're just not necessarily the whole story. And I think we need to understand that. And I was thinking about, well, how does this happen? How do we not know what forgiveness is? And I think it starts out when we're about maybe 2 or 3. And, I'm playing with Molly in the sandbox, and I take Molly's favorite doll, and Molly starts to cry. And my mom comes and says, Teresa, give Molly back her doll. And I give Molly back her doll. And then she says, say that you are sorry. I tell Molly I'm sorry, because that's what mom tells me to do. But do I know what that means? And I'm not saying it's good or bad. We need to be social creatures. We need to learn to get along with one another. But on a certain level, my own way, my brain is wired, I thought, oh, so I tell Molly I'm sorry, and that's it. It's magic. And there is one of the misconceptions, which I found when I got many more birthdays. Someone would do something and to me, or maybe somebody in my family, and I would forgive them in my heart or my head. And then I'd see them in the supermarket, and the stomach would start to churn and the thoughts would race, and I'd either put on that Botox smile, or I would probably do something even more passive aggressive, turn around in the aisle and go down another aisle to avoid that person. And that's not necessarily bad, because no one really told us a lot about what forgiveness is. They gave us a formula, and and it's a very important concept, because I personally think, and I think I have some scriptural backup on this, that if we are Christians, forgiveness is non-negotiable. We don't forgive because we want to forgive. We don't forgive because the person deserves it. We forgive because we're commanded to forgive. So as I said, I'd just like to talk a little bit about some of that. And then we'll take a little break. And then I'll lead you through the forgiveness prayer, which Mary Mazowski developed. So Mary, as Lindsay mentioned, was my teacher. Mary is also one of the founders of Contemplative Outreach. Mary died suddenly in 1993. And Father Thomas gave her funeral homily in Long Island. And when he gave the funeral homily, he said he could not have founded Contemplative Outreach without Mary. Mary was that feminine side that Thomas the monk needed. And so she was a very, very important player at the beginning, and continues to be, I think, from these practices. And I'm so happy. We do a lot of welcoming, but not in the network, but not necessarily forgiveness. And their companion practices. They dance with one another. And we'll have time this afternoon. I'd like to suggest how they dance, and we'll see what time permits. So I'm going to lead you through that. It's a formula. And I like formulas because I have a hyperactive left brain, which can complicate anything. And if I follow a formula, I'm usually more on target. And then we'll have time for questions and answers. And at 12 o'clock, we'll break for our silent lunch. And I assure you of 2 things in the schedule. We will break at 12 noon for silent lunch. and we will break at 2:50 for closure. The rest of the schedule is a little more fluid according to the number of questions and answers, because I really want you in our time together to begin to experience this prayer, which has been still, it's a powerful part of my life. It's a powerful part, as we say in contemplative outreach, of opening to God's presence and action in my life. And it's not only borne great fruits, deepened my relationship with God, it's kept me out of a lot of hot water, and that it can do too. So, it's not bad, because seriously, the more birthdays I have, the more I understand I cannot take back words. We cannot take back the words we say. And unfortunately, often we say those to those we love the most because we feel free emotionally and psychologically that we can dump on them. But it's practical, just really, really practical. And so, as I said, we'll move through the schedule. And I don't think, it's not a complicated schedule. I just want to, and along the way, I will also be sharing some of my experiences with the forgiveness prayer. That's one of the ways that Mary Mazaski taught. She told us stories. And I want to mention that now, because if I tell you a story about the way the forgiveness prayer has worked in my life, I don't want you to think that Therese is wonderful. I'm this mold, I'm this ball of clay. But it's opening to God's presence and action in our lives that bears abundant fruit in our life. That opens it. No, we all know that because we're here today. And I thank you for carving out the time. We could have been doing other things today, but this is important work. So that's our schedule. And then I know that people are visual learners. And so I just put together a very, very primitive PowerPoint presentation for the beginnings of my the first conference. What is forgiveness? And is it sharing? What am I doing wrong here? Oh, I have to.
While Teresa's working on that, I just want to give you all a Zoom tip. If you're on a laptop and possibly on other devices, when Teresa is sharing a slide, there's a little handle next to her picture, and you can use it to slide. You can slide the little handle to the left of her picture so that you can make her picture bigger and the slide smaller to your liking. And some people find that makes it easier for them to concentrate if they can see the speaker's face better.
And I'm seeing on my screen, I'm seeing it, but I'm not seeing it here. You see this on Zoom?
Yes.
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 Yes, we can see.
Okay. All right, so I'll use it without the slideshow view. It's okay. And so I think from a very practical point of view, and as we know, we've read a lot of the works of Thomas Keating, the Invitation to Love, which is a wonderful work, if you haven't read that, about how we are developed emotionally, psychologically as we mature. The spiritual journey videotapes, a lot of work Thomas has done, and how we come to maturity. And we're not perfect, although I thought I was. and so therefore many years of unlearning, right? But we feel on a certain level, emotionally, psychologically, that if we don't forgive the other person, what we are doing is we are protecting ourselves. It'll be a cold day in hell before they do that to me again. Well, yeah. And then you know what you've done? You've just closed off part of your heart. And my experience, I've been teaching forgiveness probably for about over 20 years. And just watching people then, how they forgive and don't forgive. And, if you close off your heart to this person, it's closed off to everybody, isn't it? To the people we love. You're sort of walling that off. And so you may think that you're protecting yourself, but it's just a wall. It's just a wall. We also may feel that it gives us a feeling of power. Once again, you're not going to do this to me again. But it's only a guise of power. Once again, that wall, that unfreedom, I am not going to be open, because we know the fruit of our prayer is it's about openness to life and all the activities of life. And it's not being powerful. It's being humble. It's being open. And the power that we're called to this is a feeling of really force. And I'll get to the other type of power, the real power, further on in the slides. And what we are getting out of not forgiving, escaping responsibility. Escaping responsibility for my actions. And for if people do not act appropriately, well, I think on a certain level, I have an obligation to tell them, you're off target. Or from my own sense of self-worth. I know this more and more with forgiveness prayer. You've hurt me. You have offended me. To have my voice. There are probably some other people on this call who are like me. I think one of the reasons why I teach contemplative practices is I have such great experience of the shadow side of the repressor. I'm the A++ repressor. Anybody else in the group have that? I never had an emotion. Before centering prayer, I have never had an emotion I acknowledged. Just stuff. Down. And that's not good for me, healthy. And I don't know about any of you those of you who've had that experience, when it comes up, it's like Mount Vesuvius erupting. It's not this little, the smallest little thing, when we repress and repress, the smallest little thing is the thing that tips us over. And it's like this volcano exploding. And the other person is just sitting there like, what did I do? I bumped into her with my car, whatever. But we haven't taken responsibility for saying how we have been hurt, how we have been offended. And for me, I think that's important. I want to know if I offend people, I really do want to know, how did I offend you? And because I think it's important, and that isn't that how we begin to get along with one another. But it takes a certain honesty and a certain humility to bring us to that place. So, we don't forgive because emotionally we think we're getting a payoff. We are, but it has far-ranging consequences. Oh, by the way, and it'll be in these remarks, these comments are on the website, that the webpage that Lindsay prepared for today. And these comments are from William Menninger's book, The Power of Forgiveness. The Process of Forgiveness. And an excellent book, I recommend it to you. And that's also how to purchase that, because Lindsay and I found out preparing for the workshop, it's not available on Amazon, but you can purchase it from Contemplative Outreach if you want to just have it. But as those of you who've heard me speak before may remember, if there's a choice between reading about forgiveness and doing the forgiveness prayer, I'm always going to suggest that you do the prayer. Because reading about forgiveness doesn't really give us the experience of forgiveness. Just like, as I say to people frequently, reading about transformation doesn't make us transformed. If it did, the whole world would be transformed. We're all reading about transformation. What brings about transformation is doing the practice of a sitting practice, whatever. So that's, some of the reasons why we don't forgive. I mean, there's lots of others. I don't mean this to be inclusive, but just from my experience of teaching the forgiveness prayer, some of them. And I think bigger than that, well, also important, is this: we have misunderstandings about forgiveness. It's not about forgetting. It's not about forgetting that somebody hurt me. It's not about moving into the same situation again with the same person and letting them do it to me over and over again. It is, you heard the saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But it's not forgetting. Now, with forgiveness, we can eventually come to the place where we do forget what isn't important. But we don't have to forget it right away. I was yesterday morning, someone called and I hadn't talked to in a long while. And I said, oh, this is nice. I'll pick up this call. And we chatted for a while. How are you? I missed talking to you. And then I had 20 minutes of everything that was going wrong in her life. And I got off the phone. I said, she didn't call to tell me that she was missing me. That was the beginning. But then she called because she wanted me to listen to her problems. But that really wasn't what I wanted to do at that point in time. So in the context of that wasn't really an offense, but it was just one of those things like, pile it away, Teresa. If that happens again, say to yourself, do I want to have this conversation? Because it's possible it may lead there. So forgiveness is not about forgetting necessarily. It's also not about condoning bad behavior. And once again, I advise us that when people, and it's usually people who are close to us, when they do things that offend us, we tell them. Now, I'm going to suggest throughout today, probably more than once, but I'll suggest it right here. I don't do it in the moment. I do the forgiveness prayer and then I tell them. Because if I am angry, if I'm hurt, we'll just say hurt. If I am hurt and I try to express my feelings, I blow it big time. Because it's not, I don't have the words. I don't have the words. There's that famous scene from Gone with the Wind, when she says, I'll think about Tara, I'll think about it tomorrow. Well, there are benefits to some distance and a good night's sleep sometimes. So it's not about condoning the behavior. If someone does something that offends me, I think I have a right to tell them. Now, is it in all situations? No. But the things that truly hurt us, deeply hurt us, are often interpersonal, in close relationships. It's also not about absolution. And so if somebody does something, a crime, somebody commits a crime, they have to pay for it. That's how our justice system is structured. You do the time, you do the offense, you do the time. So it's not about the free pass on that, on the absolution. People will have to pay for what they do. It's also not a pretense. I'm not pretending to forgive. I am forgiving. And that's where we need to know that saying I'm sorry when I'm really not sorry is a pretense. And that's where before I learned this prayer, where I was operating out of. I was operating out of that 3-year-old's concept of magic. I say the words and things change. And I think we all have enough birthdays to know it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It's not a pretense. And I don't say I forgive you unless I do. But when I say it, it's real. And when I say I forgive you, I release you in a certain sense from my judgment about what has happened. About my judge. And so judgment is a very interesting thing. And I learned a lot about this must have been about 15, 16 years ago. I never understood why judgment was so bad. It's like, I'm a hyperactive left brain person. I'm always judging. I'm a retired computer programmer. Does this work, that not work? I mean, it's the way my mind operates. And then about 15, 16 years ago, a good friend of mine, Ellie Light, oh dear, dear lady, she developed lung cancer. And I had known her at that point in time, probably for about 10 years. I never knew she even smoked. She had smoked as a younger woman. And she was going through some life changes. She had sold the house where she raised her family and moved to a different part of the state. And I know from some people, you know, in different parts of the country, New Jersey doesn't seem like that big a place, but yeah, she wasn't around her people, the people that she was close to. And so she was experiencing a great sense of grief. And, you know, she had lung cancer, they operated, and she decided she didn't want to have chemotherapy. That was her decision. And well, I remember telling, and Ellie did centering prayer. It was so, to show you what Ellie was as a 12-step person, as many people in centering prayer. And her friend said, I did not know her before centering prayer. Her friend said before she started centering prayer, she was always handing out 12-step brochures. After she started centering prayer, she was always handing out centering prayer brochures, that this was the focus of her life. Do this, you gotta do this centering prayer stuff. And so that's how I knew her. We had mutual friends. And I remembered when Ellie got her lung cancer, I remember sharing with another friend who did centering prayer. I said, well, Ellie has lung cancer. And the response was, well, what do you expect? She smoked. And I was emotionally, the wind was knocked out of me. Emotionally, the wind was knocked out of me because for the first time I realized when we judge others, we objectify them. They're not as much people, are they? So I just offer that in this context. It was a powerful learning for me. And so, and about forgiveness, it's not once and for all. And by that I mean that sometimes the offense repeats itself, or sometimes we experience the offense. Now, it's interesting when we're dealing with the forgiveness of prayer, not everything I'm saying about forgiveness is exterior, is with the other person. So much of it is inside of Teresa and is part of the prayer because it is prayer. And it's dealing with with my own internal dynamic. So not once for all. You know, and I think I'm laughing because the gift of birthdays is finally we begin to see some of the things we thought were so bad years ago. They're like, oh, why did that upset me? My first boss out of college, he was a great learning on how not to be a boss. But anyway, and I look back and sometimes I remember offenses and I'm like, oh, he did that. But then sometimes something else surfaces or the same one. And according to how much we were hurt, it may be the same thing over and over again. It may seem at times like Groundhog Day, but that's okay. It's where we are. It's being honest and open to what we are feeling. And I think that this is one of the ones I like. It's not weakness. Forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is true strength. That I can say to you, I release you from my judgment. It's a strong person who can do that. So then, what is forgiveness? It's a realism. We bump elbows with so many people, we're going to offend one another. And I don't know about you, the things I do that offend other people, I really don't do to offend them. It's just sort of who I am, you know. And I like to be cold on it if I hurt people. I really do, because it's not my intention. And if it is my intention, then you'll probably really know it. Excuse me for that snarky remark, but you know what I mean? It's just that I sometimes I say stupid things. And sometimes I don't know. Like that woman said to me about Ellie. She didn't know what she said. She really didn't know that she offended me. and so sometimes we just, the way we interact, and so that we can be free with one another and understand that people, that some of the things that people do that offend me, I do similar things to other people. Of course, we know that the spiritual journey is not a carpet ride to bliss, one of Father Thomas's Keating's favorite sayings. And I think at one point in time, he said, it's more like opening the cover to a sewer. But it's my sewer, whatever. It's there. It's there, our unconscious. And I'm not perfect. And I think that one of the hallmarks of growing in spiritual maturity in a contemplative path is that we have more humility. We have more humility, and we have more acceptance of other people. And with forgiveness is freedom. Freedom, I don't have to be reactive like I have been. And I often say this with welcoming too, but as I say, they go hand in hand. There are members of, going back many years when I started centering prayer, I'm sure there's members of my family who knew that if you said this to Teresa, she would react this way. And reacting is not what we're called to do. We're called to respond to life in love. And so we have the freedom then not to be automatons. We are not victims. We are not victims of our circumstances. We are free human beings. And I can choose how I am going to respond in a situation. That is my choice. And I have power. And this, as I alluded to before, when we're talking about we think we have power. There was a psychiatrist, and as a matter of fact, Mary knew him. They worked together for a while in Long Island, David Hawkins. And one of his seminal books, he was a psychiatrist, and then he got a PhD, I guess, in philosophy or something. And he wrote a book, Power versus Force. So he became a kinesiologist too. But it was such a good thing to me because that title of that book, what I often thought about is I often thought that they were the same. But force is that exerting myself, imposing myself on others. And power is that force that comes from us. They came from Jesus. And I don't have the gospel, the exact reference, but there's one point in time when Jesus is walking through a crowd and everyone is trying to get to him, the miracle worker. And he says to his apostles, who touched me? And they're like, oh, he's got to be crazy. There's all these people. And he said, I felt my power go out from me. And if you've ever met a powerful spiritual person, well, if any of you have had the privilege of meeting Thomas Keating, he was one of those people. I had the privilege of knowing him since 1991. And what I saw less and less Thomas Keating and more of God. And I always found that so helpful because that's what we were all called to do, to be, once we were on a contemplative path, channels of God's grace. So that person, that power of God in people's lives. Forgiveness is release. I don't have to carry this. I often say to people when talking about forgiveness, does anybody have anybody in their life that rents space in their head? Do you have a couple of people that rent space in your head? It's like, And sometimes if people we think about first thing in the morning, talk about starting the day on a bad note. But we're released from that burden of not forgiving. A sign of positive self-esteem, forgiveness. I can forgive you. And the process of forgiveness is really, from my perspective, and from the forgiveness prayer perspective, the process of forgiveness is for participation in the energy of God. And entering into, once again, the deepening of my relationship with God. The next point, and that's one of the reasons I like Meninger's book, and he teaches it a little bit, but as I said, do the prayer, and the prayer will teach you. It's a process. So I don't do it once for all, as I said on the previous slide. I do it as best as I am able at this particular time. And that's good for me because doing it once for all would be kind of scary at times with some people. But the Spirit is leading the process. And I do it as best. Now, I can tell you as a process, I'm dealing with the same people over and over again. But as I can deal with at the time, which is important for me, how can I deal with hurt? Because the hurt is not here. The hurt is here. And then what's not on this slide, because it's not part of what Menninger teaches, but part of what I'm teaching, and importantly, it is prayer. I can't forgive without God's help. I know that. And I know God wants me to forgive. God wants me to forgive for my freedom. God wants me to forgive so I can be all that I can be and participate more and more in his life while I'm still in this package. And be those beacons of hope to the world, the lights that shine, the salt of the earth. Be who we're called to be. So now we're up to break time. And if you have any questions about any of this, we can do it in the first Q&A or another Q&A, but there's not right here, not time for Q&A. There's time for a 5-minute break. And if I'm going to stop my share, and then Jim can share his timer, and we'll take a 5-minute break. And then I'll come back and I'll lead us through the forgiveness prayer. Thank you. Welcome back from the break. And so now I'm going to lead you through the forgiveness prayer practice. So I invite you to close your eyes. Take some deep breaths. And just breathe in and breathe out. I'm going to suggest that you begin to focus. You take your mind's eye, that intuitive eye, and you bring your attention to the top of your head and begin to relax your scalp. Relax. And you can silently say the word relax. And that's to transmit to your body that now is the time to relax. Relax your scalp and the muscles of your face. Bring your focus, your inner eye, to the muscles of your face and begin to relax the muscles of your face. And now allow your tongue to float in your mouth, not touching the roof of your mouth or the floor of your mouth. Let it float there. And what that does is bring your body, mind, and spirit into balance. Float your tongue. Now bring your attention to your throat area. Softly and gently using the word relax. Relax. The back of your neck. Take your inner eye and bring your focus to the back of your neck. Silently and gently relax. 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 Now bring your attention to your shoulders. Relax your shoulders and your upper arms. Let them hang there loose. Relax. That inner eye, that focusing, is like a laser beam, powerful, penetrating, a great light. Now bring your focus to your lower arms and relax, relax. Now bring your attention to your upper back. Relax the muscles of the upper back. And just move your gaze, your focus, down the spine and up. Gently moving down and up and relaxing the muscles connected with the spine. Relax. Bring your attention and your focus to your buttocks. Relax the muscles of your buttocks. And bring your attention and focus to your abdomen and relax the muscles of your abdomen. Gently relax. Relax. Now bring your attention and your focus to the thighs of your legs, relaxing those muscles. Gently relaxing those muscles. Past your knees, the calves of your legs. And allow the stress and discomfort to leave your body through your toes, becoming very relaxed. Now bring your attention and focus to the chest area. And just allow that light to move in a circular motion around the bosom, resting, open, relaxed. And now enter the bosom, that space between the breast. Be one with that focus, that light. And enter the bosom, moving through a passageway that is warm and dark and safe and warm. And move down the passageway, relaxed and safe, moving deeper and deeper through this passageway. Moving slowly, relaxed. At the end of the passageway, there is a doorway filled with light. Move toward the doorway filled with light and give yourself permission to move through the light and through the doorway. Moving through the light and the doorway out into a meadow that is filled with light and sunshine and a soft breeze that just moves across your face. And using all your senses, smell and touch and taste and sight, move down this pathway, allowing the sun to warm you on the path to your sacred place. A sacred place that is filled with light, with the spirit. Enter into your sacred place and rest in the bosom of the spirit, allowing yourself to be held, to be nurtured, resting in the bosom of the spirit. using all your senses. Be present to the spirit. And in just a few moments, a person will appear. And when that person appears, just invite that person into your sacred place. Use the person's name. Allow that person to enter into your sacred place. And you and the person, in the presence of the spirit, experiencing a very safe place, begin to share with the person how you have been hurt, traumatized, and be very specific, sharing your feelings, your thoughts, and your experience of how you have been hurt. Allow yourself to open and to share your pain, your experience, and your relationship with this person. And now tell the person that you forgive them. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And now ask the person how you have offended the person, hurt, traumatized the person. Ask, how have I hurt you? And just wait for an answer. How have I offended you? Now ask for forgiveness. Forgive me. Forgive me for offending you. Forgive me. And now allow the person to leave your sacred place. Always open if the person needs to return. Allow the person to leave as you continue to rest in the bosom of the Spirit. Rest in the grace of God. Resting, resting. And now prepare to leave your favorite and sacred place. It will be easier to return if you choose to. And feeling refreshed, move down the path toward the door filled with light. And give yourself permission to move through the doorway into the passageway, feeling safe and warm and light. And just move into the chamber of your heart and your bosom. And allow yourself to emerge into a normal state of consciousness. Very slowly, safely. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So notice two things or one thing, two aspects of one thing, that when we go into that sacred place, we rest with the Spirit. The prayer is being done with the Spirit. I'm not doing it on my own. And trust me, after doing it for many years, there would be some people I wouldn't have let in that sacred place initially, but they were probably the best people to let in. And after the person leaves, we continue to rest in the Spirit. Their Spirit is companioning us in this process. And in that companioning, we're open to God's presence and action. Prayer. Prayer. So questions about the process, or anyone want to share experience? Now, Lindsay's going to help with the Q&A. Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. And that's part of the power of this prayer, is that we can resolve issues I have with people who've passed on. And I think that's so freeing. And according to what you believe, where we go after we pass, some people say that gives the person who's passed greater freedom. But definitely it's what I'm holding. And so it's sort of like, it's what's in this container. And for some reason, this hurt, it's still there. And that's a great way to do it. Yeah, to have that hurt opened, to have it healed. Yeah. Was that your experience? I don't mean to pry, but.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. And so thank you. Firstly, with the power of music, yeah, how that we vibrate with that. What's stored in our bodies, vibrations, emotions or energy and emotion, all of that. I do not, if we're where we're headed with that is listening to music while we do the forgiveness prayer. I don't advocate that. I advocate keeping the prayer as simple as possible to follow. It's a formula which I still follow, but it's those other experiences. And so, I said part of this afternoon is integrating this into everyday life, because I think as we move into that concept of wholeness that we're called to, in John's gospel, Jesus says, I came that you may have life and have it to the full, so that you're dancing with the past. And it's all good. It's all part of the whole. So the fact that that person showed up is not a surprise. And also one of the things you mentioned, which many people are surprised at, is that they wind up talking to their younger self and forgiving. Sometimes it's a conversation, but more often than not with me, it's been a forgiveness of something I did when I was younger. So very much a, a yeah, an integrative experience. So thank you for your sharing, Anne. Thank you. Thank you. No, in this process, there is no space for dialogue. We accept what the person says, and just as what thank you, when I'm telling them how I have been offended, there's no space for them to tell me. So we're sharing our individual experience. And so then I mentioned that it works with the welcoming prayer, and I'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon. That maybe when I come out of the forgiveness prayer, there is something I'm in experiencing in my body that I will work with. But I just accept it's what their reality is. And so it is still a sacred space, Amy. It's just that what happened wasn't what you expected to happen. And I would say that most experiences, each experience of the forgiveness prayer for me is different. And so you had certain, but it is a sacred space. So be assured of that going forward. And so, in a certain sense, you're very fortunate, because when I did the forgiveness prayer, I never heard anything from the people. They were mute. But I don't think I was ready to hear anything. It's being led, and please, all of us, please understand and believe deep within us, this process is being led by the Spirit. Because sometimes people show up, as I said, that I wouldn't want to. And so, but also what you mentioned, your whole story, Amy, is just so powerful. And it's such a wonderful illustration of one of the points I made. It's a process. And so you may have kicked him out, him or her out. That's okay for now. And we can say, I've had enough for now, if that's where we are. But no, for sure, that person's going to come back. But that's okay. Your space is safe, is sacred. And that, as I said, that person, it's very likely the person will come back. But that's something, you have unresolved issues that need to be resolved. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your sharing, Carmen. And so I do have a question for you. When you were discovering the theme, was that during the forgiveness prayer or outside of it?
During.
That's a lot of thinking. And if you notice, the prayer goes through that whole relaxation, and even that floating the tongue, get us out of the top 3 inches of our head. That was one of Mary's wonderful phrases. Get out of the top 3 inches of your head. All right, I understand that, but I understand, I encourage us not to analyze the prayer as we're doing it. Just to let the people come in. Now, from what you're saying, they came in. You've been dealing with this constellation for more than 5 minutes. For years, right? For years. But that's different. But what I'm saying, thank you for your comments. And what I'm saying is, it's important to let the people who need to come in. And that's what you did today. And guess what? You say you feel free now. I'm happy. There's often such a release in the forgiveness prayer. They may be back. So I encourage us not to have expectations. As a matter of fact, one of Mary Wazowski's famous expressions was, if you want to suffer, have expectations. We set ourselves up. So when we move into this space, most times, and I'll speak about it differently this afternoon, but the way we did it today, it's to let whoever needs to come. And these people have needed to come because they've been renting space in your head for a long time. And as I said, they may come back because of the length of the issue. And also I sense it's also an intense issue. But that's great because even now, isn't there a little more freedom?
Completely. Yes.
That's great. Thank you for your sharing. And so once again, I invite us always, all of us, not just Maggie, not to try and figure out what's happening in the prayer,
Okay.
just to follow along. That insight is being given to you for some reason.
Okay.
And if you need to have anything figured out, it'll be outside the prayer.
Okay.
You just want to experience it. Now, I would say this, and I don't mean to minimize the hurt that you're experiencing, but I think part of what surfaced during this particular session of the forgiveness prayer for you is you really, once again, it is that emotion that you're carrying within you, and the fact that it came up into the awareness. And were you able to say the words, "I forgive you"?
Okay.
It's a process.
Okay.
You'll be back.
All right.
And so I think the other thing I'm also hearing you say, Maggie, is it was your first time through.
Mm-hmm.
And now you know that is, I asked for forgiveness. I tell you how you've hurt me, and I ask how I've hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't get necessarily input on both sides.
Okay.
And and I would say for you, if the issue continues with this person, if the process continues with this person, it's going to be slow and probably painful.
Okay.
But it is a prayer where God can lead you through step by step. And often it's baby steps if we've really been hurt. But it is the path to forgiveness. So thank you so much for your share, Mary.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And trust God and trust the process. So I'm just mentioning just the power of judgment and the fact that when we do judge people, we really don't value them as children of God. I don't. I mean, so what I'm looking at is I'm looking at behavior. I'm not looking at their essence. And I think that the world would be, my own personal perspective, the world would be so much better off if we could accept each other person for their giftedness, for what they bring, rather than, at the end of the day, and surely, oh my goodness, at the end of my life, I don't want to be judged by not. So that's all I'm saying, is that we think that I think I have a right to judge everybody. I'm walking down the street and I'm like, just walking down the street and I'm like, why did she ever think that pair of shoes would go with that outfit? You know what I mean? And it's not bad and it's not good. But when we do it to other people, it can be. That's what I'm saying. And when we judge, we often say that that's almost their identity, and it's not. That's sort of what I meant. And so two people showed up. Are you calling the people forward? Maybe, maybe not. And I would suggest that, and see, this is not a once for all prayer practice. If you haven't figured it out now, this is a lifelong prayer practice. You will be surprised if you keep this up, Colette. You will be surprised at some of the people who walk in. It's like, so in a certain sense, and also God knows what's in our hearts better than we do. God knows who you want to forgive. Thank you so much for your questions. And Lindsay, maybe one more, or we're getting close to lunchtime.
Louise, and then let's leave the other questions for later. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, and thank you for your courage to speak your truth too. Not an easy thing to say. So thank you, Louise. And so, yes, but we are companioned, and I think you have that there. And so when we do the prayer ourselves, we are in control of that pause. And so I'm running a little bit late on lunch, but I'll continue with that as I begin to give instructions on lunch, if I can figure out once again how to share my screen. So we have this web page, and I can share. I can shoot it out in a chat to everybody. So we had the schedule, which I review, but we also have, and we have the Zoom meeting. We don't need that anymore. We have the forgiveness prayer, the words of the forgiveness prayer practice there, right there. And so I invite you to sort of take them with you eventually by the end of the day, or you can use that. We also have those notes I made from William Menage's book, which is, just for people who like to save notes. We also have a recording of Mary Mazowski leading the forgiveness prayer. And when you come to those pauses, you can pause for as long as you want. And that's what I think what you need at this point in time, Luis, just to be able to pause for a while, and be able to. Now I invite us for lunch. I'm ahead of myself. No, I'm 12. No, noon is lunch. I invite us for lunch to do either of two things or three things. One is the silent lunch, which Lindsay will explain after I do the other two things. The other thing is I invite you to do the forgiveness prayer, to continue along, to use the recording or to use the words, whichever, to get more of an experience of what it is. Because as I said, each period is different. I don't know what life is like where as far as the environs. Sometimes I'm really a hyperactive, not only left brain, I'm a hyperactive person. If you want to see a caged animal, see Teresa during a 2-day snowstorm in New Jersey when I can't get out. It's like, oh my goodness. So if you want to get out and move energy around, that's also another thing. Maybe go for a walk. Or the third option, and then we will gather again at 12:45. We have one person who had a question outstanding, and we can start with that person's question. I don't want to lose that. So, and Lindsay, the third option, if you would explain to the quiet lunch.
Well, there are some instructions on the web page if you would like more guidance for a quiet lunch, and you're welcome to leave your camera on or off to sit in front of your screen or not sit in front of your screen, but I will leave the Zoom on through the.
Well, welcome back. Hope we all had some space there, the space that we needed, that we could take, and just take care of ourselves and what we were called to do during that time. And in the meantime, Lindsay did post a notice on the chat about the Facilitators Day for February 13th. So you might want to look at that. Great value and power in coming together as community. I think that's one of the important parts of contemplative outreach for me. And Lindsay, we had a question left over from this morning.
Yes, there are two questions, Teresa. There's also one in the chat from Paul John. So,
Lorraine, thank you so much for your sharing. Thank you for the courage to share. And thank you for being you're sharing such a wonderful example of so many things I was talking about this morning when I was talking about forgiveness before we moved into the prayer. We don't necessarily know whom we have hurt. And so and thank you for your honesty in sharing about the darkness it's opened up. But there's a wonderful thing about darkness. It covers light. And if you notice, when we start the forgiveness prayer, sometimes I use the terms interchangeably. I apologize because they mush together at times with Teresa. But we notice when we start go into that space, into our bosom, we start in darkness, and yet we move into the light. And I think we think because we're we live in such, we think, efficient times that there are shortcuts to everything. You got bread makers, you got whatever, Um, um, I was surprised a couple of years ago. I color Easter eggs with my niece and our children every year, and I found out that they have electric egg cookers. It's like, my goodness, you just put it in a pot. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But in life itself, and thank you, as I said, so much for your example, in life itself, and in the spiritual life, and in working with what we are holding inside of us, which is one of the chief barriers to God in our life, to deepening our relationship to God in life, is the fact that we think we can go around. It's only through. It's only as we move through the darkness and we move through, and thank you also for your witness, because what it said to me, which you may not have heard, you trust God and you trust the process, Lorraine. And that's so important and so important. And so I work on the welcoming prayer team for contemplative outreach, and we've been doing a lot of work. We had a new online course, and we talk so much about, we talk about consent, our prayer of consent, and welcoming prayer is consent on the go. And then Thomas Keating spoke so much about, after time, consent deepens into surrender. There's less resistance to God, because finally Teresa understands that God's way is better than mine. Scriptures have been telling that me for years, but finally I get that. And then we move into, can move, are invited to move into a deeper place where part of that surrender is radical, invincible trust. That whatever happens to us, God is there with us, and it's for our good. Um, Revenge and forgiveness. Um, and so let's go back to what said earlier about absolution. That forgiveness is not, it's not a, what did I say? Words, they elude me. I said it's a misunderstanding that it was absolution. It's not absolution. But revenge is something else. And I agree with you that our brains are wired. There's so many wirings in the brain. As a matter of fact, many of you have had the opportunity to hear, many of you have someone who does centering prayer, a neuropsychologist, Dr. Charlotte Tomeno, talk about centering prayer and neurology and she says that what happens when we do centering prayer is we create neural networks in our brain for God, for grace. Wow. And so then we begin to see things differently. And so if the way, Thomas Keating, he talks about the different levels of consciousness. He starts at the very low level of its mythic membership, its tribal consciousness, and then it moves up. And so we all have parts of those. And I think one of the things that we're keyed into those, where they're still remnants in those, is a lot of the addictions come from that level of consciousness. That something happens to me and I want to feel good. So it's not just there, but it's part of that level. And so in calling in the spiritual journey, in moving on to that level of forgiveness, we're moving into a deeper participation in the life of Jesus, in the life of God. And so the revenge, the shot of adrenaline I get from revenge, and it really is chemical, and all emotions have chemicals associated with them. That's that of adrenaline, like, and it's a powerful chemical. I mean, they still use it to shock people back to life. I think, it's powerful. It's a powerful chemical, but I don't believe that it really reaches the higher level of consciousness that we're called to as we deepen it doesn't, as we deepen our relationship with God. The revenge is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And that's not Jesus' way. And the disciples must have been a motley crew, but then aren't we all? But anyway, and then so they're trying to figure out get this forgiveness thing right because it's new to them, you know. And I think still in some places where there is a lower level of consciousness in our world today, they still do things if someone's caught stealing to chop off their hand. Now I would say that's revenge. I mean, it's also payment for the crime, but it's, you know, and so the apostles, you know, they're trying to figure this thing out. And so they say to Jesus, well, how many times should I forgive? So they think of this most outlandish number they can come up with, 7. And he looks at them and he says, 7? 7 times 70. And then as numbers have grown since Jesus' time, I would say it's 7 times 7 million, 7 times 7 billion. But it is moving, it's moving away from revenge, absolutely. Revenge triggers the pleasure centers. But remember, we're also moving away from this over, because Thomas Keating also, excuse me, talks so much about the emotional programs of happiness. How we're keyed into our needs, our emotional needs, or our demands for security, affection, and control. And that's part of that. And yet the gospel call is the call to freedom beyond that. So that when Jesus is about to breathe his last breath, he doesn't ask for revenge. He asks for his Father to forgive those who have put him on the cross. Is that helpful? Yeah. But it's a different movement. Now, does that mean if I want to forgive people that I can't enjoy football? Nah, not at all. Not at all. My grandfather was one of the most loving, tender men I ever knew. I would watch him. I forget what night it was, some weekend. They had fights on TV. You know, it's a long, long time ago. And he would be sitting there, he would be jabbing them, going along with the fight. But it's a different energy when we don't want to do it to annihilate the person that's the recipient of the energy. So thank you so much for your question. And I think with that, we'll move in. We don't have any more left over from this morning, right, Lindsay?
Not that I'm aware of. It's time.
Yeah, we can ask, is there anyone has anything left over from this morning?
Is there someone I didn't see? And it does seem like if you can't use the raise your hand icon, then putting it in the chat is the next best way to get my attention.
Okay, so we're going to do that. I'm going to lead you through the forgiveness prayer again. So I invite you once again to close your eyes. And, you know, we say the welcoming prayer, for those of you who are familiar with that, is consent on the go. You don't have to close your eyes. With the forgiveness prayer, you're going to be closing your eyes. You're going to that interior space. And so I invite you to take some deep breaths and just breathe in and breathe out. I'm going to suggest that you begin to focus. You take your mind's eye, that intuitive eye, and you bring your attention to the top of your head. And begin to relax your scalp. Relax, and you can silently say the word relax. And that's to transmit to your body that now is the time to relax. Relax your scalp and the muscles of your face. Bring your focus, your inner eye, to the muscles of your face and begin to relax the muscles of your face. And now allow your tongue to float in your mouth, not touching the roof of your mouth or the floor of your mouth. Let it float there. And what that does is bring your body, mind, and spirit into balance. Float your tongue. Now bring your attention to your throat area. Softly and gently using the word relax. Relax the back of your neck. Take your inner eye and bring your focus to the back of your neck. Silently and gently relax. Relax. Now bring your attention to your shoulders. Relax your shoulders and your upper arms. Let them hang there loose. Relax. That inner light, that focusing, is like a laser beam, powerful, penetrating, a great light. Now bring your focus to your lower arms and relax, relax. Now bring your attention to your upper back. Relax the muscles of the upper back. Just move your gaze, your focus down the spine and up, gently moving down and up and relaxing the muscles connected with the spine. Relax. Bring your attention and your focus to your buttocks. Relax the muscles of your buttocks. And bring your attention and focus to your abdomen and relax the muscles of the abdomen. Gently relax. Relax. Now bring your attention and your focus to the thighs of your legs, relaxing those muscles. Gently relaxing those muscles. Past your knees, the calves of your legs, and allow the stress and discomfort to leave your body through your toes, becoming very relaxed. Now bring your attention and focus to the chest area, and just allow the light to move in a circular motion around the bosom. Resting, open, relaxed. And now enter the bosom, that space between the breast. Be one with that focus, that light, and enter the bosom. Moving through a passageway that is warm and dark and safe and warm. And move down the passageway, relaxed and safe, moving deeper and deeper through this passageway. Moving slowly, relaxed. At the end of the passageway, there is a doorway filled with light. And now move toward the doorway filled with light. And give yourself permission to move through the light and through the doorway. Moving through the light and the doorway, out into a meadow that is filled with light and sunshine and a soft breeze that just moves across your face. And using all your senses, smell and touch and taste and sight, move down this pathway, allowing the sun to warm you on the path to your sacred place. A sacred place that is filled with light, with the Spirit. Enter into your sacred place and rest in the bosom of the Spirit, allowing yourself to be held, to be nurtured, resting in the bosom of the Spirit. Using all your senses, be present to the Spirit. And in just a few moments, a person will appear. And when that person appears, just invite that person into your sacred place. Use the person's name. Allow that person to enter into your sacred place. And you and the person, in the presence of the Spirit, experiencing a very safe place, begin to share with the person how you have been hurt, traumatized. And be very specific, sharing your feelings, your thoughts and your experience of how you have been heard. Allow yourself to open and to share your pain, your experience, and your relationship with the person. And now tell the person that you forgive them. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And now ask the person how you have offended the person, hurt, traumatized the person. How have I hurt you? And just wait for an answer. How have I offended you? Now ask for forgiveness. Forgive me. Forgive me for offending you. Forgive me. And now allow the person to leave your sacred place. Always open if the person needs to return. Allow the person to leave as you continue to rest in the bosom of the Spirit, in the grace of God, resting, resting. And now prepare to leave your favorite and sacred place. It will be easier to return if you choose to. And feeling refreshed, move down the path toward the door filled with light. And give yourself permission to move through the doorway into the passageway, feeling safe and warm and light. And just move into the chamber of your heart and your bosom. And allow yourself to emerge into a normal state of consciousness. Very slowly, slowly, safely. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Questions, comments? Thank you, Joe. Yes. And sometimes we need to hear messages. And so there's a change in your being. It's lighter. That, if you will, burden, even though it didn't seem to be heavy, is lifted. Thank you. Thank you. Has everybody been able to find a person when they do the welcoming, when they do the forgiveness prayer? Does somebody come in? Okay, as long as if somebody doesn't come in, you're really probably resisting the prayer. When I started to do the prayer, I had a line. I had a line waiting to talk to me. And I was so resistant to the prayer that that line, most of the people never told me how I had offended them. You know? And so, I mean, that's part of it. Now, additionally, we do the forgiveness prayer when we know we need to do the forgiveness prayer. So this is a laboratory. We're teaching it. And maybe at least if it came in once, the person came in once, that's great. And so you'll know in everyday life when you need to do the forgiveness prayer. Those people who rent the space in your head. If you're always judging somebody or some people, them, whatever. It can be if there's an uncomfortableness about a relationship when you begin to move toward that relationship, when you begin to know that or think about that relationship. And so we say that we do the welcoming prayer when we're aware of something that's happening in our body. We do the forgiveness prayer when we're aware of a dissonance in a relationship. And they dance together, but not at the same time. Important. So when I'm doing my forgiveness prayer, I don't go from there to welcoming. I stay with the forgiveness prayer. But then sometimes when I come out of the forgiveness prayer, then I go to the welcoming prayer with what I am experiencing in my body. But very much, they dance together. It's about what is coming up from the unconscious, what the spirit is, and when is enabling to come up. We say when we teach our simple centering prayer method that both silence and thoughts have a place to play in the prayer. That silence creates the space for healing and thoughts are part of the healing. So the forgiveness prayer, that what's coming up, that's part of the healing. That these are relationships you need to look at for whatever reason. And thank you. You've been, from what you've shared with me, you've been very good at not trying to analyze or judge what's happening. Just accept it. If you are to read, sort of like the thoughts in centering prayer. Let them come, let them be, let them go. And if you are to receive an insight about what is happening with those thoughts, you'll get it at another time. And we all have that experience. And we all trust in the process, or I dare say, we wouldn't be here today. And it is a process. And the spirit is leading the process. For sure, the spirit is leading the process. Anything else?
Modesta?
So absolution is not mine to give. that's God, and if you're my tradition is Roman Catholicism, that's the role of the sacrament of reconciliation, which is important, which is the spirit led you right here because it is an important point I haven't made yet. And so and in the essence, when I forgive, I I participate in the forgiveness of God. When I forgive, I give that gift to other people. And there is such profundity in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us as we forgive others. And part of the profundity is, as I learn to forgive others, I learn how much I have been forgiven. Wow. Wow. God is so generous and so gracious. And so I'm participating in that stream when I forgive. And when I say it's not absolution, what I mean is it doesn't mean that what you did was right. So it's conflating both condoning and absolving. But it doesn't say that you have no part, and it also doesn't say you. So in the canonically in the sacrament of confession, of reconciliation, it's almost like everything's forgotten. It is, in God's mind. I absolve you of your sins. The slate is clean. That's what's believed, at least in my tradition, the Roman Catholic tradition. It's not the same in relationship. And that's because we're not God. And we're participating in God's activity, but it's not the same level of participation. Is that helpful, Modesta? Is it helpful?
Very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. And so but I'm releasing the person of the burden of my judgment, that much I know. And I'm freeing up that relationship because, and going back, I think I didn't fully answer, Paul John's question about revenge. Very, very good question. On the level of relationships, basic just relationships, there's part of me. And so my sister's a retired fourth grade teacher, one of my sisters, and she was upset many, many years ago with her granddaughter, who was 3 at the time, and she was in preschool. And so somebody took a toy from her, and she did what a 3-year-old did. She took the toy back and she hit the kid. A little comical in a certain sense. Well, my sister was, wow, how could she do so? Well, that's what 3-year-olds do. But, we're called to act differently than we did when we are 3. And the thing with the absolving is it doesn't make, just because I forgive you, it doesn't make it go away. It is still there. The slate is not clean. It may eventually disappear into the background. And so the point I haven't made yet, and thank you so much for your comment, Modesta, is about reconciliation. Reconciliation is the restoration of relationships. And so this is not necessarily about that. Some relationships cannot be restored. Some relationships it wouldn't be good for us to restore. This is about forgiveness. This is about my part in the hurt, in the relationship. I also truly believe that if reconciliation is called for, God helps with that. But it's not always, and sometimes we're dealing with cases of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual. There's never any call to reconciliation there. Forgiveness, but not reconciliation. And so I think that's one of the barriers too, often with people with forgiveness. They think, oh, I'm going to have to see. No, you don't have to see that person again. If that's not in your best interest, you don't have to do that. You don't have to share time and space. But the Gospels are clear that you must forgive them, anyone who offends you. So thank you for that trigger, Modesta. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. You're not the first person who's ever asked that in the forgiveness prayer workshop with me. So thank you for surfacing that. And that is the person you work with. You work with God in the forgiveness prayer. And you tell God how you have been hurt and traumatized. And you forgive God. And then you once again, and always, please, thank you, always ask the second question. How have I hurt you? Because I don't do anything wrong. on a certain level. That's the way, but ask that too. And so, no, that's a very appropriate. Thank you so much, Umi, for mentioning that. And so, it's about a relationship, and a relationship is dynamic. And there may have been something that's happened in our relationship with God that has hurt us. We may have felt that we were abandoned. I mean, you talk about abandonment. The Garden of Gethsemane. Oh, if I were Jesus, I would have run to New Jersey that day. Never mind, stay there. Stay there. And that was part of the role. But notice, he questions, doesn't he? He doesn't just accept. Why, to his father, why have you abandoned me in the whole process? And so it's very appropriate because of that. And so I trust that, and the process, but I also trust that through the forgiveness prayer, it will deepen this relationship with God. And there probably has been a separation because of this feeling of shame of asking God that question. And yet, through the scriptures, people have asked God that same question in words and in deeds. The Israelites, when they're going through their travels. Oh, would that we had died. And oh my goodness gracious, they've been delivered and they can't accept the gift they have. Whatever. And it's honest and it's real with me. And so use the forgiveness prayer for that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Thank you so much for your question, Mary. And so remembering that this is all interior.
Yes.
This is all within Teresa. So it's just because it's relationship, it's dynamic. I have never really encountered a time when it hasn't been appropriate. Have I asked the question many times and received no answer? Yes, that's true. And so, but I think asking the question opens me to the reality that I can offend people without me even knowing it. And personally, just my experience of forgiveness and just life, most of the times that I offend people, I am clueless. I'm clueless about that impact I have, my actions have on other people. And so I would say yes, ask the question. And sometimes too, you may not get any answer, but it's opening us to the possibility that we could have offended. Is that helpful? And so I guess my first answer would be that it might have been in the treatment I received after I did what I did. But you are talking about deep issues. You're talking about more than hit and runs. And so I would offer this insight if let me know if it's helpful. Mary Mazowski, when I met her, she was living in a lay contemplative community in New York State. And one of her outreaches was to people, men in a maximum security prison. And she taught them centering prayer. She taught them forgiveness prayer. And she said that what they wanted to do when they learned the forgiveness prayer is they wanted to write to the people they had offended, they had victimized. That was and so I would assume, Mary, that interior dialogue had taken place inside the prayer, that they had talked to the victim. And Mary said, no, that's not your right. That's not your place.
Right.
You don't write to that person. It's about you forgiving them, and not, in this case, literally, not about reconciliation, because that was, farther off the chart. They started receiving letters from the people they had hurt without any association over years. The people reached out to them, because what's happening is we are communicating, and that's why the prayer, I feel, I've used it many times with people who've died, who've passed on. We're communicating with each other at such a deep level. I'm not a big psychologist, but we talk about the collective unconscious. In spiritual terms, we talk about the communion of saints. We talk about the mystical body. We are communicating at that level. And so I asked the question just because there might have been some way in which I offended the other person. If teaching this prayer to prisoners, which is not inappropriate at all, I would ask them to ask that same question. Just so it makes it a two-way street too, Mary. If I'm just saying what I have, and to be perfectly honest with you, I have been blindsided when I've asked that question. And I did what? And then it was, oh, I did. Because my eyes weren't open, my ears were not open to see the reality. So I would say in that case, it's valid. Do we always expect a response? No. Did I finish answering your question?
Yeah, that was.
As it's being the forgiveness, it's about that release. And so often it's about that release of energy that we're carrying. When we teach I don't know if welcome him, but when we teach our welcoming prayer, we say the issues are in our tissues. We only have one container. This is where our unconscious is. And if you're like me, the great A++ repressor, we just try and stuff down. And it works maybe for a while. But so that, and I see the look on your face, it's not terror. There's a lightness about it. Do you feel lightness about your being that you didn't at the beginning of the day?
Absolutely.
And sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes it feels dark and it feels like we're in the sewer. But we don't stay in the sewer forever. But we have to, if the sewer is where we need to go, we have to go through it and not around it. But no, that makes sense. And so thank you also about your comments, because it is a process. And so, some of me, I want to get, I'm from the New York metropolitan area. I want to get things done in New York minute and get it over, move on to the next thing. And you know what I mean? And I've got to, the same people keep showing back up, because the issues I have with certain people, I've had all my life. Family of origin, whoever. And so that's the path to healing, is to go through these things. And so it's actually wonderful. It's a wonderful way, and it's the way to be free. And the roadmap is in God's way, in God's time. And so I consent, I surrender. Go ahead. This is one of my points I still haven't covered yet. Just Scott.
No, I trust you both.
Oh, thank you. You're generous. Thank you. Anything else? Thank you. So this is one of those prayers where you learn so much more from each other than from me, which I'm so glad we have this wonderful group here. I would like to just see what else I did all those, explicitly call some people in. I would just like to tell two stories, because as I said, Mary told stories, and I think it's appropriate sometime for us to speak our mind to the other person, and sometimes it doesn't really matter. So one is just really a forgiveness prayer example, and the other is a forgiveness prayer welcoming prayer example. The forgiveness prayer example is, years ago, I was hiring somebody to work for me at AT&T, and my manager said, hire whoever you want. So I'm a person who takes you on your face value. You tell me that, I believe it. And so I went through all the processes, came up with this Excel spreadsheet, the matrix, blah, blah, blah. And it came up with the person I wanted to hire. Then my manager said, fine, let's go to my manager. We went to her manager, and he said, let's go to my manager. And I'm beginning to think, I'm not hiring the CEO of AT&T. What's all this stuff about? But, being good corporate citizens, because if you work for a large corporation, things don't have to make sense. One of my friends, whenever we get stupid things, she would get all upset about, oh, this is stupid. And in the end, she would do it. She'd have to do the stupid thing. It wasn't illegal or immoral. It was just stupid. I would just do the stupid thing and save myself a lot of emotion. So the day we go to see that, now the person we eventually had to see was the vice president of human resources for this organization I worked with in AT&T. And I'm like, what's this all about? We walk in that day and she has some of her cronies with her. I said, oh, this is really, you're being set up, Teresa. And so, you know, my manager spoke and she said, well, Teresa, my candidate was Lori. The other candidate, which was right below Lori, was Mary Ann. And so my manager said to this, my manager Daphne said to Linda, oh, Teresa has decided to hire Lori. And she said, oh, that's too bad. Mary Ann is going to be so disappointed. Mary Ann was promised the job. No one clued Teresa in. It was like, if you just told me that the whole thing was wired, I would have just fallen along. But now you gave me the idea. That was okay. I was, but not really okay. I was mad. But I didn't speak because I already beginning to understand that if I speak when I'm, excuse me, I have a little twitch in my back and I have to fidget a little today. I blow it big. So my manager said, well, Teresa likes to think things over. Can she have a chance to think this over? I said, oh, yes. Well, on your way out, make an appointment to see me. I said, okay, I'll do that. I'm still mad as anything. And so that particular weekend, I was going away for a 9-month course weekend. Invite everybody to come September 2021. We're going to start it back up in St. Lawrence, 1 weekend a month for 9 months. It's fantastic. But anyway, I went away for that weekend and I was thinking, Mary Ann, I never promised the job to my candidate. Mary Ann was promised the job. Mary Ann was disappointed. Disappointment stinks. There wasn't this much difference. It was this much difference. I could live with Mary Ann. I preferred Lori. But as I said, I could do that. So the next day, the day of the appointment, I go in to speak to the vice president. She's all by herself. And this is, I invite all of us to speak our truth when we feel called to speak our truth. It doesn't matter what the consequences are. When we know we are right, speak it, but don't speak it with a lot of emotion. If I had spoken that Friday, I wouldn't have had many long years of employment with AT&T. They might have booted me out the door if she got a piece of my mind, because it wouldn't have been a piece that she liked. But that day, I said to her, in the same tone of voice with which I am speaking to you today, I said, I have decided to hire Mary Ann, her candidate. I said, but I need to tell you one thing before I do that. And she said, what is that, Teresa? And I had this young guy who worked for me, 18. This is going back into the late 80s, early 90s, when I wore a wool suit to work in the summer. You know, that real corporate image. The first day this guy's working for me in the summer, he shows up in shorts. Go home and change. Oh, felt like I was dealing with a 3-year-old, but anyway. And so I said to the VP that day, I said, if I hire Mary Ann, I will have 2 people with disciplinary issues working for me. And she said, hire Lori, my person. I spoke my truth. I wasn't taking any hostage. I was just saying, this is true for Teresa. And then I turned around and I walked out. I didn't ask her for any reasons. But do you understand what I mean? Sometimes, and it didn't matter to me. And it's interesting, looking back on that many years in distance, it didn't matter to me that day what she said. But it was a part of my own self-respect that I had to speak what I thought was true. And it's not just forgiveness, but I'm just saying sometimes we need to speak what we find out. And it was the forgiveness prayer that helped me come to that place. Another one is forgiveness and welcoming. So I rent, so every once in a while, including this past year, when my landlord decides that they want where I'm living, I have to move without being my decision. And that happened, I guess, about 20 years ago. And I was moving from apartment when I shared it with my mother into a 2-bedroom apartment into a 1-bedroom apartment. And I had an extra set of bedroom furniture and I had no place to put it. So one of my sisters said to me, it was my mother's, it's, it's of 60 years old, mahogany, a beautiful piece of furniture, versus particle board and all that stuff they make nowadays. So one of my sisters said to me, she said, I have a great idea. Why don't you have mom's furniture refinished? And then you'll have a beautiful set of bedroom furniture. I said, that's great. I said, what do I do in the meantime? And she said, oh, we'll move with your current bedroom furniture. And then when they deliver when they refinish mom said, what you can do is you can take your furniture and you can store it in my basement. And then if you ever want it, it'll be there. Sound like a good deal to me. Next day, called the guy to refinish the furniture, came, picked it up, and then he delivered it. And at the time, he delivered it into my kitchen in the new apartment because the bedroom furniture already had bedroom furniture. So I called my sister and I said, you're never going to guess what's happened. The guy who finished mom's bedroom said, delivered the furniture today. It looks beautiful. She said, oh, that's great. I said, do you remember what you said that you would do once it was delivered? And she said, no. I said, you said that you were going to come and pick it up and put it in your basement and store it for me. Oh, I think I did say that. But, I don't think that's a good idea anymore. Why don't you just, ask your landlady if there's some place where you can store it in her apartment house? I said, okay. And, A++ repressor, anybody else here? Anything for peace in the family, And I hung up the phone. I said, okay, thanks. I hung up the phone. But I remember to this day, as I hung up the phone, I said this to Theresa. She always does this to me. So the next day, I was getting up to go to work, and I couldn't telecommute because I was filling in for somebody else. And I remember leaving my apartment. My laptop was by the door, and I picked it up. I was in a snit. I just picked it up with all that emotion. And I get to the parking deck of the building I work in, and I get out of the car, and I'm walking with my back like this. Now, I don't have anything physiologically wrong with my back, but that was a key to me that I had an issue to deal with because I was clueless. I had just repressed the whole thing. So I was like, oh, I started using the welcoming prayer. The welcoming prayer didn't touch that energy. I was like, I wonder why the welcoming prayer is not, oh, maybe I need to do the forgiveness prayer. And I did the forgiveness prayer. I didn't know when I started, who I was doing the forgiveness prayer with. I just knew I was in distress and I needed to do something. And so I started doing, and then I realized it was my sister. She had promised to take care of this furniture. And now here it was sitting in my kitchen and it was crowding the kitchen. And so I was like, oh. And so I eventually did that. And once again, as I said, there is this dance. I would do the forgiveness prayer, do the welcoming prayer, blah, blah, blah. And I never told her about that incident. And why didn't I? Well, I'll tell you why. It was all on me. Why, when she said, we'll move it, why didn't I say, thank you so much, I'll call a moving company? It was expecting somebody else to take care of me. I have enough birthdays to take care of myself. Now, when I want to move, I call a mover. We were recently shopping. I did move into a new place in the middle of the year, and we were recently shopping, and I saw a chair that I liked. And she's a very kind, loving person. Trust me. She's not, doing this out of any malevolence. And she said to me, she said, well, maybe my husband and I said, stop it right there. They were going to pick it up from the furniture store and deliver it to my apartment. I said, I think of myself this way. At my stage of life, one of my responsibilities in the economy is to employ people who are at lower level jobs. I am going to pay to have that delivered. And she said, that's a pretty good idea. But notice I was no longer expecting her to take care of me. I mean, it's subtle, But we don't have to go out and people, when we get insights, it's not necessarily about them. Sometimes it's about me. And so it's deciding when and if we need to speak. Does that make sense? Because sometimes we don't, and sometimes we do. And sometimes people, I can tell you, sometimes I've offended people and they're clueless. And to apologize would be really embarrassing. But you'll know when you need, and it's important that you speak your truth. It really is a principle of self-esteem. I spoke my truth. And as with that vice president, I really didn't think she was going to say hire your person. I really didn't. But I needed her to know what my truth is. And it's important for us because the welcoming prayer, the forgiveness prayer, especially the welcoming prayer, they do not invite us to be doormats. We have legitimate needs, we have legitimate wants, and when those are violated, we speak our truth. And people hear it. When we speak truth, we had, not last year, I think it was the year before, we had somebody in our 9-month course who, she didn't like the way her job was running. She was working for somebody who had a federal contract. And the people on the federal team were lying to everybody and lying to each other. And she finally said to me one weekend, she said, I can't stand it, Theresa. I'm going to quit. I said, well, her husband had a good paying job. That's a good thing. I said, can you afford to do that? She said, yes. So the next day, the next work day, Monday, she went into her office and she said to our boss, I quit. He said, why is that? He said, because these people are lying and cheating. He said, nobody ever told me. He said, I don't do business with liars and cheats. What I ask you to do is I ask you to stay until the contract is over, and I will not renew that contract. She spoke her truth, and it didn't matter to her at that point in time. You know, she had said the job was over. But I just, and I think it's important, as we are people of the light, people, the salt of the earth, that when necessary, we speak our truth. And if you follow your heart, you'll know when you need to do that. But those are just two examples. I mean, and it's God at work. It's God at work in me, letting God, having God lift some of those needs I have. With the vice president, I felt I wasn't being taken. My opinion wasn't counting for anything. And I needed to speak up about that. With the furniture, it was a little silly. And not. And so, as I said, and it did absolutely happen. And my sister, when the furniture was delivered, she said, you were right. That's an odd-shaped chair, and it would have been, but anyway, it is what it is. And so we use these in everyday life. As I said, with the forgiveness prayer, we do actually come apart and close our eyes, unlike the welcoming prayer, consent on the go. And I'm just going to sort of move through without any further breaks, Lindsay. I think we're okay with that, and probably end a little bit before 2:50. And so here we are. And most of you have stayed all through the time. I got that little counter on the back, on the bottom of the Zoom screen, tells you how many people are here. So thank you. Thank you. And so I presented this workshop in many ways. And what I wanted to give you all today is an opportunity to experience or re-experience the forgiveness prayer at a deeper level. And I invite you, if you come up with another opportunity to do it, don't say I've done that. Every time I present is a newer, deeper experience. And I suggest every time you experience the forgiveness prayer, it will be newer and deeper. These welcoming prayer, forgiveness prayer, centering prayer, Lectio Divina, the contemplative prayer practices are just so profound, really. And in a certain sense, they have a life of their own. But I also want you to consider the investment of time. 5 hours, wow. So I want you to continue to do the forgiveness prayer for 30 days. Just to do it once a day so that you have the words. So 2 things, there is the words are on of the forgiveness prayer on the website. There's a recording of Mary Mazowski leading you through the forgiveness prayer. And what a lot of folks have told me recently is they've recorded the forgiveness prayer in their own voice and downloaded it to their smartphone. And then when they want to do the prayer, they can do it using that. And then what you can do then is when you come to those pauses, you pause the recording for as long as you do that. And so, once again, in a need for efficiency, I suggest that you do the forgiveness prayer first thing in the morning, right after your morning centering prayer, because then you don't have to go through the relaxation exercise. Because Mary said the chief purpose of the relaxation exercise was to get people out of their head and what they were thinking about the situation. So I do and I will be doing it with you for 30 days. I do my centering prayer, and then I go right into that space, that interior space in between the bosom. I still go through the tunnel because I believe that there's importance in that imagery, and there's a certain letting go as we move through that space. And just do it for 30 days and let God show you what God wants to show you. And then it also becomes more of a tool that you can use when you can't find words. You know, when there is a crisis, when there are challenges. But I would say that not a week goes by where I don't use the forgiveness prayer at least a half a dozen times, and some weeks more. It's an important prayer practice, and that's why I'm happy that you're here, because it's not one that we necessarily teach a lot in the network, but I think it's so important. It's so very important. And so that's sort of now, and I'll give you a pass. So if it's 4 o'clock and you didn't do your forgiveness prayer of that morning, I'll let you go and say, you can make the intention, I'll do it tomorrow morning. And do that intention enough, and it will happen in the morning. Because as I said, it's just very important, a very important prayer practice. Now, there may be a tendency on some of us, maybe just on my part, to leave the workshop and to call people up and to say, I have this wonderful new prayer practice for you. You know, are you starting to make your list already? Don't. That's not how this is spread. Do the prayer, and you will change. You'll be a softer and gentler person. You will. And people may notice the change and say, what's happening? Forgiveness prayer. And then they'll look at you like you're from a different planet. But that doesn't matter. But that is how one of the ways we transmit it, is to do it. And to be the forgiving presence in the world today. And not that antithetical. Not the me, them, not us and them. But to be that light, that salt of the earth. And just continue to do. And maybe sometime, no one's ever really asked me, but I know I'm not as judgmental. I know that one of the things I know about myself is I'll speak my piece once, and I won't do it 10 times and try and ram it down your throat anymore, which is a big thing for me, who always thought I was right. So as best as you can, continue going forward, because it's powerful. It really, and you've seen that in a certain way. And I don't want to call anybody out, but sometimes when there are breaks in the prayer, I scroll through the faces because they're all so beautiful. But I also saw some tears, and that's fine. So the Desert Fathers and Mothers, 2nd and 3rd century, they prayed for the gift of tears because they knew that they opened the heart, that they washed away bitterness, and they softened harsh feelings. I'll repeat that. The Desert Mothers and Fathers prayed for the gift of tears. See, we think they're a sign of weakness. No, they're a sign of healing. It's like, give me the tears. But they knew that they opened the heart, that they washed away bitterness, and they softened harsh feelings. So this is your first introduction, wonderful beginning. If you've renewing your experience of the forgiveness prayer, wonderful. It's powerful. It's life-changing. And yeah, can't say enough. So anything, I don't know if we have any questions left, Lindsay, or you want to wrap things up, or I'm finished. Thank you.